So, Mike Sear, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Why don't you take a few moments and tell us something about yourself or things that we should know about you and why you're running?
All right. Well, a few of the important things. One, you might look at me and say, look, I know that guy, but I don't know Mike Sear. A lot of people in town know me as Mike Rogers. Some know me as Doc Rogers. For some reason, a handful know me as Jeff. A lot of them are stage names. They're names that I've worked in for various things just to keep distance between you and the projects you do. If that makes any sense.
Sure.
I'm a barber in town, so I do get to sit around and hear everybody's complaints and concerns about St. John. You don't hear more truthful opinions than you do in a barber chair. I have worked with the PSP program with the Canadian Armed Forces under the Department of Morale and Welfare and did 6 months in Latvia, assisting with the morale and welfare of our Canadian service personnel over there. I've been the announcer for the Fog City Rollers, local flat track roller derby team under the WFTDA for better part of 10 years. And I was the announcer for the St. John Riptide right up until I left to go to Latvia.
Wow. Yeah. So why politics?
Why not would be the better question.
Okay.
The short and sweet of it is I am tired of petty party politics. I don't like seeing people get elected and wind up just fighting for their party. Instead of fighting for you. I've experienced a lot of the problems that have gone on in St. John. Housing insecurity, I'm a golden example of that. I'm currently sleeping on my parents' couch. Like, some of it's to help them out, but mostly it's just because housing is unaffordable for people who aren't in a higher income bracket than myself. Things like that. I've had problems with the healthcare in New Brunswick. I'm watching individual currently go through late stage liver failure and watching the problems they've been having with healthcare, the problems I've had with it, the mental health issues in New Brunswick. And everybody just seems to fight over the best way to take care of it instead of just doing what's right and fix it. I want to just do what's right and fix it.
So what's a campaign day like for you in this COVID environment?
Honestly, the campaign days for me aren't too dissimilar from a lot of my regular days. I still get up, I go to work, I talk to people, I come home, I help with my parents with their lives because, again, elderly and not doing well, they need help. I intersperse in amongst that time on social media. Social media right now is playing a bigger part, and I think this election and any election we've had locally before, because it's the safest way to contact people. I do spend some time postering. I don't have a big budget, so I don't have a lot of money to go out and do fancy things. I don't have a campaign headquarters. I don't have giant billboards to put up. So what I do is I reach out to people in my community, the people that I know. I try to do things via word of mouth because that I feel more impactful than anything else. Yet again, it really does boil down to spending time on social media, contacting people, doing interviews like this, just trying to get my voice out and have people hear it and see me as another option and a viable candidate.
Sure.
I'd love to do door to door, but with two immunocompromised individuals in the same space I'm living in, it's just not safe for them. I will, coming up where we're hitting into the long weekend, I'll have a little bit of time. I'm hoping to do some meet and greets outside over this upcoming weekend.
Sure. I'd like to ask a bit about voter turnout rate. The turnout rate generally in the province has decreased from a high of like 82% in 1967 to a little over 66% 2 years ago. And it's notoriously low in St. John, and particularly low in Harbour and in Portland Simons. Do you have an explanation for this, or what can we do to increase the voter turnout?
Well, I think a lot of it is a combination of both education and apathy. When you're winding up with people who are graduating and getting out of school that can just barely read, if at all, which is a huge plot hole that we have in our education system, to engage somebody like that on politics who has never had a basis in it, who doesn't necessarily understand it or even have the ability to attain that information, that is going to be a big hit. The other is candidates being presented mostly by parties that are not representative or indicative of their local people. Like, sometimes they're people from outside the community, sometimes they're just people from outside the average income bracket of the individuals there. When you're looking for somebody who's going to represent you, you're looking for somebody who's like you. You're not looking for somebody who's you know, they're making a good livable wage. They haven't experienced what you have experienced. They haven't come into the same problems that you have or the struggles that you have. So even though they seem to be speaking for you or offering things that would be good to you, they seem still to be talking down to you at the same time. And it's nothing that they can necessarily do, but to have an experience like somebody else that is sometimes so negative that to even have the concepts of what it's like to even just live in your car. Like, if you haven't experienced poverty, how can you truly talk to somebody who is currently experiencing poverty and not sure where they're going to sleep that night or where their next meal is going to come from if you yourself have never experienced that even once?
It's a great segue into one of our questions. We canvassed a number of community organizations in the constituency, and the next couple of questions are based on themes that arose from questions that they submitted to us. And the first one deals with poverty rate, or poverty rather. Rates are persistent in St. John Harbour. Minimum wages are low and tied only to inflation. Social assistance rates are low. Millions of dollars has been spent by the province in St. John since the election in 2015. What do we have to do to get that rate down?
Well, I think the easiest way is start ground up. Start at the very bottom of where your poverty starts. Start with those who do not have access or stable food sources and do not have places to live. If you start there, things start getting easier as you go up. We've learned time and time again, it's just way cheaper to house the homeless. And it's way easier to just feed people without food. It solves the amount of money we save on the back end of those deals, not band-aiding or dealing with those problems by actually just fixing those problems. If you look at the amount of problems that we have in our healthcare system that are related to malnourishment or not having enough food, that's expensive to deal with. It's a lot cheaper just to feed somebody. And it's not like we're not producing enough food to feed everybody in this province. If we worry about taking care of that, that's going to give us that first leg up. We're going to start helping people at the bottom develop those skills. And as we get that settled, start looking into things like a universal basic income, which if we eliminated things like a social assistance program and replaced it instead with a universal basic income, and look at all of those other departments that we could eliminate and replace with one department doing one thing, it would save us money on the initial. It would also put money back into our economy and give people the opportunity to educate themselves, to resolve issues with mental health, to resolve their physical health issues. All of these issues that go to making someone unable to really participate fully in society, to achieve their dreams of potentially even just gaining gainful employment. It's so difficult for people to pull themselves out of poverty when you don't have the basic things like a home and food. If you give people a home and food, they can now work towards all these other things to really better themselves and actually be able to do it. It's one thing to offer a course on how to do the skills for work. It's a whole other thing to give somebody a place to work from. And that's the big thing. You could give free education to everybody who's below the poverty line, but it wouldn't necessarily make a difference if they don't have the two basics that all humanity needs, and that's a place to live and something. If you don't have that, where are you going to go?
COVID was totally unanticipated, but its impacts were to show some pretty glaring issues for vulnerable populations. Food insecurity, isolation, mental health issues. Precariously employed constituents, for instance, raised the lack of paid sick days as a major concern. The opening of schools worries many parents. What like is your plan to ensure that the issues highlighted by COVID are addressed?
Well, really, it is COVID, as terrible as it has been a great thing for showing us all of the holes that we desperately need to fill. There's a lot of problems that we've had that people often push to the side that were really brought to the forefront, such as food insecurities, which is something we really do have to dig into. In addition to that, the precarious, basically gig industry that we have in New Brunswick, where people are not in stable positions anymore. We really need to start rewarding companies who are providing not just a fair wage, but a livable wage. things like paid sick leave need to be mandatory. The, the amount of money lost to things just like influenza, when somebody shows up that's sick, goes in and suddenly it's spread through your entire work staff, and you're losing a couple of days from each of them, when it would have just been cheaper to pay out 1 day a sick day for that individual to get a chance to get better. Even 2 days a week, you're not losing your entire staff and they're not working at a reduced capacity. The mental health services desperately need to be staged up in the Maritimes, everywhere. Even Canada-wide, I can almost guarantee you, everybody needs to step it up. It's so difficult for people to actually get the help that they need. The amount of people that I have gone with to seek mental health, a lot of people don't know this. Ask your friends, they'll go with you and they'll help you get the mental health that you need. But when you show up, it's just not available, or the wait times are so long. When somebody's in a mental health crisis, they can't necessarily wait 3 weeks, a month. Someone can't even wait 12 hours for somebody to help them out. We need to have that help available and ready, and we need to provide more of it. The amount of people who are out there that a little bit of therapy could go a long way to reintroducing them back into society, that are now on disability because maybe they don't have the tools to deal with things like agoraphobia or their anxiety, their panic attacks, things like that, or they don't have the money for the medication to help take care of these. So suddenly these people get pushed out of the main, almost normal aspects of society and wind up on disability, when they could be a great asset to their community, to the province, to be even just a taxpayer. But they can't, because they can't get the help that they need. They can't be given the tools that they need. And when you have holes like that, or even our holes in our healthcare system that COVID really stepped up and showed, we have a lot of overworked, incredibly tired, and not well-paid individuals taking care of our healthcare.
That's a good segue into a question on healthcare.
Yeah.
New Brunswick has the second highest rate of disability in the country.
Yep.
And constituents in Harbour have reached out and raised concerns about mental health and addictions, wait times, access to a family physician. So what's your prescription? What would you recommend or do to improve our healthcare system generally, and in the constituency in particular?
Well, in general, I think we really need to work and maybe even lean on the New Brunswick College of Physicians, because we've had a lot of great physicians who have wanted to move here, but they've created so many roadblocks in actually coming here and becoming a doctor. There's even a handful that I know of and have met, talked with individually, that have actually gone through and actually just became nurses because they just want to work in healthcare locally. But they can't use their education and training from other areas, and there's no real easy way for somebody's accreditations to be carried over or to be reviewed, or even just like you do a couple of these classes, we can test your thing. We need to do some work in finding ways to better integrate individuals that want to move and immigrate here, that have these credentials that we so desperately need. We also need to make it easier for those individuals to access those credentials here. When people want to study to become a doctor, we shouldn't be hurling up roadblocks and everything on their education. We should really be embracing that. It's like, you want to learn this, you want to put in the work, you want to put in the time. Let's make it as easy as humanly possible for them to become a doctor, because if a doctor becomes a doctor from our community, they're a lot more likely to work in our community. We also need to go through and make it easier for these doctors to work, streamline how billing works, and also open it up from, I believe right now the billing window is like 15 minutes to meet with your patient. It's somewhere like that. They put limitations on basically what you can bill for, how much of your time, when really we should be looking, I don't care if it's a punch clock system, when your patient comes in, you put your Medicare card in a little slot and it measures how much time he has to bill you for by the minute. I don't care what we have to do, but doctors need more time with their patients, more abilities to see with their patients, and we need more doctors looking after their patients. We also need to pay all of our support staff substantially more when we get into nurses, who in all reality are doing a lot more with you than your doctor. And it's nothing to discount what doctors do, but your nurses, they're the ones who are there with you the whole time, versus the doctor who comes in, gives the instructions to the nurse. They're the ones who make sure your IV's in, gets changed. They make sure the medication is given to you when you're in the hospital. all of that type of stuff. And a lot of them are incredibly overworked. And I don't know why the system looks at it like it's better to pay overtime for these nurses than it is to hire someone else and then pay them all a fair and equitable wage that they really deserve. We should be on par with everywhere else in the country. We shouldn't be one of the lowest paid for medical professions in the country. That doesn't help us at all. And in turn to that, you're also going to wind up with a lot of individuals who aren't getting the care that they need based on the limitations of having overworked, tired, and not enough employees. So suddenly your wait times go longer. I look at myself, I had an umbilical hernia, which really made life quite difficult for me, but the wait time for that was almost a year. I'm not productive enough at work when I can't lift things and do things. Whereas if you have somebody like myself, Ian repaired earlier, I'm back to work full in a lot shorter time, being a more productive member of our society, which at the end of the day, we need more money to be able to do things in the province. That means we need more people paying taxes. So if we can fix the people who aren't able to pay all their taxes, who aren't able to work, we're going to get more on the back end of that. Maybe we wind up with a net zero, but I'd rather a net zero with healthy, happy individuals than to be slowly falling further and further down a hole and have nobody.
Just 2 months ago in July, there were 89 people in St. John actively experiencing homelessness. Men, women, young, old. Concerns were raised by constituents about systems and hospitals and jails discharging people into homelessness. And it's become a growing problem in the community. So what, in your opinion, what does the province need to do to end homelessness?
Well, I will say right off, at 89 people, I am shocked that we only have that few. It feels like a lot more. And I know quite a few. But what we need to really do to end homelessness, house people. It seems like a simple answer, and it really is. If you house people who do not have a home, if you just look at, there are people out there, and there are people suffering with homelessness that would rather wind up in jail than continue to be homeless, so they can be crimes. The amount that it costs us to keep them in jail is far more than it would to just put a roof over their head and food in their belly. If you factor in the amount of times that, unfortunately, St. John City Police would be called to deal with somebody sleeping outside somewhere because they literally have nowhere else to go, we're going to save money on that. If you look at the people who have to spend time in hospital, because yet again, when you're homeless, you still get sick, you still get hurt. And they can't necessarily release those people back out into the wilds of St. John to live rough on the street. They need to keep a hold of them, and that's going to cost us more. Then a lot of illnesses that wind up in the hospital from homelessness are caused by being homeless. So if we can solve those problems, we're going to save money on the back end. We're not going to be worried about trying to fund shelters, which we need to have employees and are temporary and don't lead to stability for the individuals that desperately need it. Just give them a home. Do we have to build a giant apartment complex to house them all? Maybe. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe we need to start looking at building tiny home communities. I've seen that work in, I do believe it's Alberta. They have it's similar to a tiny home. They look closer to weather havens, but it's a place to call their own. It's a place that you can lock a door, keep the things you own, and they're yours. It gives you your space, and that is the first step towards bringing somebody back into society from homelessness, is giving them that ownership of a space that's theirs, to give them that normalcy. Once you get them to that point, it is you can't treat somebody's mental health issues if they don't have a place to go, because all the work that you do to try to treat that mental health issue is all going to be undone the next time they need to find a bed. You need to give that balance and stability to somebody so that they can grow as an individual. And most people, when given the opportunity, if not all people, will do what they can to better themselves when they have the stability to do so. So I've seen some areas of the world that have actually gone quite hard with this tiny home community setup, and it looks wonderful, and it apparently has some great results by having tiny homes that are a place that you can walk and call your own, that you can sleep, a community kitchen in the center, and recreation area, and an area where You can have people go and assist with mental health issues, who can help them apply for things like if you wind up with a universal basic income or social assistance, or apply for student loans to go back to school, or even just get the opportunity to learn how to cook, feed, clean, care for yourself, because a lot of people who are in these positions of homelessness are multiple generational poverty and have not necessarily had the opportunities like yourself and I, to go through and actually learn how to cook a healthy meal or understand what you need in a healthy meal. Now, I'm not saying all of them are that, but we got to give them all the opportunity to learn these things, because education and a place to live and food in your belly, holy, if we can give that to the bottom rung, the top rung is going to change a lot, because it's just going to continue helping out. Like anything, if you build a good foundation, all the other levels on top.
This is a question we're putting to all of the candidates in Harbour, and it's a fairly easy one to answer. And it's, do you support the proposal to build a new school in the South End?
Of course. I've been I spent my entire life in St. John. I've been educated in schools in St. John that were built decades before I was born. I know the limitations of these places, and it can impact your education quite strongly, because when the money is going to upkeep on a building, that money is not being spent on education materials. It's not being spent on the important stuff that actually helps students. And between when I went to school and now, the technical requirements for schools is worlds apart. And even just retrofitting a school for the infrastructure required for the computers and the systems that people are going to need to be able to best educate our students for the future is almost certainly going to be a large amount of money more than it would be just to build a purpose-built space. So invest the money now, because investing in the youth coming up is going to be our best hope for a better future. We can't have, you want to build a space that people want to learn in, because we need them learning. And if you're in a space that is run down, decrepit, difficult to operate in, and just difficult to keep up, replace it, build new. It makes good sense. And if I'm not mistaken, there's some money on the table potentially for new infrastructure spending for schools right now. And it's better to take advantage of that money when we have it available. Because if we don't, we all know if you don't take advantage when money is on the table, when you desperately need it, it will not be there.
Any other issues you'd like to address, or any final comments?
Couple of weird not issues that I really would love to address. One is I would love to pave the way towards the abolishment of daylight savings time. Now, it sounds like a funny thing that a politician would really want to push hard on that. But one, we've grown past the need for it. There really is no need for us to have this. And two, the amount of health effects and productivity issues that we have from it are immense. For what just seems like the change of a single hour at 2 points in your year. I don't know about yourself, but I know me, the next day after a time change, I am almost all but useless, because you're confused, you're thrown up. Studies have proven that depression can often be triggered by daylight savings time. Well, imagine if we could suddenly solve one problem with depression and mental health issues in New Brunswick and not have to really spend a dime. Like, it's not an expensive thing to just not do something. Furthermore, the amount of heart attacks 3 days after a time change actually increased quite significantly. And it's a study I never thought of, and an angle I never would, but the stress that it causes on your body and the change of your sleep cycle, immense. And if you've got people going through all of this stuff, what's that doing for your businesses? I don't know about you, but I've worked in a lot of jobs like retail, call center work and all that. The week after a time change, your employees are all but useless. And I don't mean that to speak ill of the employees, but timings are off. People are late for things because their internal clock is all screwed up. The general morale of individuals is quite low. So you're losing a lot of productivity and time because we're doing a thing we don't actually need to do. And a lot of people say, well, the farmers need it. If you talk to any farmers, I've talked to a lot of them. They don't get it either. It's not for them. They wake up when the sun rises the same day, the same time every day. The sun is up, they're up. And at the end of it, farm animals can't tell time. It's not like it's helping them any. It's really a big thing. The other is transit. Local transit is very important for not only our most vulnerable people, but for dealing with greenhouse gas emissions, for dealing with our environment, and just making a place more livable. I have been numerous places with great, and I mean absolutely stellar public transit systems, and I tell you, you don't want to have a car there. It's so much easier to get around. It makes your life less stressful. It makes your life easier. It makes your commute just a breeze. You show up, you sit down, you get where you're going. By weakening public transit and not supporting it and dropping the money in it and leaving money on the table like we've heard some other people do with supporting public transit, you wind up making the people who are more vulnerable, who are having a harder time getting by, even worse. And you're hurting business at the same time. When you're not running buses on Sundays, but businesses are still open, how do you expect a lot of your employees to get to work? It's not like many of these businesses are paying well enough for them to own a car. Minimum wage in New Brunswick is not paying you enough to both have a home and eat, let alone have a home, eat, and drive a car. So you've got to pick your battles. And one of our battles should be having a well-established public transit, because you've got the elderly who may have difficulty driving. They still need to get to their appointments. And if we make it difficult for them, that's just going to cost them more money that they don't necessarily have to get to. You've got students who need to get back and forth to school. If we want people living in the areas that we have available in St. John and not clustering tightly in areas, we need to have a great network of transportation for everybody. Do we want to deal with parking issues uptown? There's not enough parking. Everybody always complains about that. When you hop on a bus, you don't have to worry about it. It just makes everybody's life easier. And we need to go through and not even only worry about inner city public transit, but we need to look at New Brunswick wide. Because if I want to go to Fredericton, right now my only option is I can hop on a car or I can hop on a bus when they run. So that's not a guaranteed thing. We need to look at inner city public, whether that becomes small buses that run in between, whether that becomes a light rail system. We need to look at how we can get our population more mobile. We need to stop worrying about designing our infrastructure for everybody driving a car and start worrying about the infrastructure for everybody just getting where they're going.
Very good. Mike Sear, thanks so much.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.